A loud diplomatic and military scandal between the United States of America and Europe shifted to the Munich Security Conference. The Europeans have finally fallen out with Donald Trump's administration. United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio even cancelled his meetings with European leaders just minutes before they were supposed to start. And the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, directly stated that the United States is no longer a partner and the old world has finally collapsed. While the United States is profiting from the war in Ukraine, Europeans are paying for it, and that's why Europe must participate in peace negotiations on Ukraine. These are the kinds of statements being made now on the sidelines of the Munich Security Summit, and that's true. Well, for example, it was the European allies of Ukraine who agreed at the Ramstein format meeting to provide Ukraine with a new military aid package worth $35 billion to strengthen air defense. But the United States didn't provide anything for free. That's why European leaders expressed their protest to Donald Trump's administration in a harsh manner. And it seems that this tension has led Europeans to completely lose faith in America. My name is Alexei Pecci. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start this episode, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave any comment below. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Peachy News. The link is in the description of this video. So, the only idea that both Europeans and Americans agreed on at the Munich Security Conference is that the international world order no longer exists. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz warned that Europe's freedom is no longer taken for granted in an era when major powers ignore international rules. And here, Friedrich Merz on one hand condemned Russia's aggressive war against Ukraine, calling on Europe to invest in strengthening its own deterrence. On the other hand, he openly criticized the administration of United States President Donald Trump for its policies on tariffs, climate change, and cultural wars. So Merz is saying, listen, the era of the superpower has arrived. It's hard to say which of them causes more harm, but when it comes to the question of whether the old world order is dead, the United States administration seems to agree with the Europeans. Guest Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated the following in Munich, quote, "The old world, frankly, is in the past and we are living in a new era of geopolitics. This will require all of us to rethink what it will look like and what our role will be. And I think Europe needs honesty. They want to know where we are heading, where we would like to go, where we would like to move together with them." And on that same day, after such a statement by Marco Rubio, Friedrich Merz said the following, quote, "A rift has formed between Europe and the United States, and the international order based on rights and rules has come to an end. The United States' claims to leadership have been called into question, and perhaps they have already been lost." It is telling that Friedrich Merz even responded to the words of United States Vice President J.D. Vance, which he said at last year's conference. And so, in his statements in 2025, Vance launched criticism at European politicians, claiming that they are allegedly suppressing freedom of speech, losing control over immigration, and refusing to cooperate with far-right parties. And today, a year later, Friedrich Merz responded so sarcastically, quote, "The culture war of Make America Great Again supporters in the United States is not our battle. Freedom of speech here in Germany ends where the spoken words are directed against human dignity and our basic law. We don't believe in tariffs and protectionism, we believe in free trade. We adhere to climate agreements and the recommendations of the World Health Organization because we are convinced that global problems can only be solved together." And Merz's last words were met with loud applause. Well, because these comments came after the Trump administration raised tariffs on goods from the European Union and the United Kingdom, and also withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement and the World Health Organization. And a little later, the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, switched to English, addressing Americans, saying that in the era of great power rivalry, even the United States will not be strong enough to act alone. Dear friends, NATO membership is not only a competitive advantage for Europe, but also a competitive advantage for the United States. Washington should keep this in mind. Well, that's a hint that, listen, it's not just Europe that needs America. America needs Europe too. And we shouldn't think that only Europeans in NATO are trembling and thinking, God, I hope the Americans don't leave. No, Americans also need to consider, what if the Europeans leave NATO? So what does Europe do in this situation? And recently, Europe signed 2 major trade agreements that had been postponed for many years because everything depended on America. The first was with Latin American countries, and the second agreement was with India. Now, Friedrich Merz is going to China at the end of February to conduct trade negotiations. Meanwhile, Trump is confident that his tariffs will force Europe to come to him and beg for mercy. Let me remind you that this conference in Munich took place just a few weeks after another tense meeting of world leaders in Davos. In Switzerland, where Trump gave a speech in which he sharply criticized European leaders for their migration policy. And he complained that the United States is fighting and suffering from abuses by its European allies. And now the Europeans have responded to Donald Trump, and they're not choosing their words anymore. Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski stated that Europe should participate in peace negotiations on Ukraine, since it is Europe that is financing a significant part of Ukraine's defense against Russia. And then there's a quote from Sikorski. It's getting a little strange. We're paying for the war, and we don't even always have complete information. European Union countries have already spent more than 200 billion euros supporting Ukraine and have pledged another 90 billion. That's enough to finance defense for about another 2 years. Europe is spending real money, specifically by purchasing American weapons for Kyiv, so it has the right to have a say in determining the terms of a possible settlement. And it's important to understand here that Sikorski is not reproaching Kyiv, but rather Donald Trump and the United States as a whole. His statement came amid increased United States efforts to end the war, and today Trump said that no, Zelensky needs to make concessions because, in his opinion, Putin wants peace. At the same time, the latest negotiations between the United States, Russia, and Ukraine took place without the participation of European representatives, which naturally causes concern in the European Union, even though Europe truly has the right to take part in the negotiations. Well, in addition to the amounts announced by Sikorski, Ukraine's European allies agreed on Friday to provide Ukraine with a new military aid package worth $35 billion to strengthen air defense. And what are the United States doing? And in the meantime, the United States is selling weapons. And it all ended with the United States Guest Secretary Marco Rubio at the last moment at this Munich Security Conference, cancelling his meeting with European leaders on Ukraine. It is reported that Rubio was supposed to meet with the leaders of Germany, Poland, Finland, and a representative of the European Commission, but at the last minute he just went ahead and cancelled the meeting. And according to Bloomberg, Europeans see this move as a sign that Washington is less interested in involving European capitals in its efforts to resolve the conflict in Ukraine. Instead, Marco Rubio met separately with Friedrich Merz and today will meet with Vladimir Zelensky. Well, I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you found this episode interesting and informative, you can support our YouTube channel with your donation, paid or sponsor subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. I would appreciate any support from you. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.